So, the coronavirus has hit us pretty hard, and you may be just like me and be a landlord. So, if you're a landlord, what is your number one concern? That would be collecting rent, right? Well, what we have seen over the last couple of months has been completely unprecedented, and I hate using that word, but it's true as far as moratoriums on being able to evict individuals who choose or cannot pay. Normally, in Texas, where we invest, it is business, tax, and landlord friendly, meaning that we can evict tenants if they have not chosen to pay on time as according to their lease. But right now, we actually cannot evict anybody until we reach a certain date and until we have any forbearances lifted or stopped on our properties. Now, I also want to address individuals reading this who are also on the tenant side of things. I rent my home that I live in, but own everything that other people live in, or everything that I own other people live in. I do this for flexibility, but now I realize that actually what it does is it helps me to see from both sides. So, from a renter standpoint, I felt exactly what everybody felt whenever the first opportunity to not pay your rent came about. And I decided to treat other people how I wanted to be treated. Now, I paid my rent the first month of the inability to evict tenants on the 1st. I normally pay by the 3rd in full. And the second month, I paid by the 1st, again, in full. Again, I'm just trying to treat other people how I want to be treated. And for those tenants who see this as a window of opportunity to screw the man, if you will, this is not the right opportunity to do that. What I think a lot of renters may not realize is the individuals who own buildings and apartments and places where you live, we landlords and or investors, we are just regular people like you. So in order to be able to keep the property from foreclosing, we have to pay the mortgage, we have to pay the interest, we have to pay the taxes and the insurance every single month. In addition to that, on our large multifamily properties, we also have to pay maintenance staff and front office staff in addition to these other regular costs. So we have to keep the grounds safe and also clean and sanitary for everybody that's on the property. In addition, we need somebody to help make sure that if anyone has a maintenance request or if they need to pay their rent or if they need repairs, anything that's related to the property, we have the proper staff to be able to handle that because I cannot do it on my own. I bring in the experts. I think a lot of people think that landlords or investors are greedy, they're wealthy billionaires who have tons of money and stuffed in accounts and they could afford to take a hit, and so therefore I'm going to choose to rent strike or fight, like I said earlier, the man. But really, you're not fighting the man, you're fighting your fellow entrepreneur. So if you've ever tried to start a business, that's exactly what we do when we own these apartments is we run a business. So if we can't get the rents that we need, we can't pay the mortgage, we can't pay the insurance, we can't pay the taxes, and all the things I mentioned earlier. And we also can't keep the grounds clean and safe and keep people employed, which is our biggest concern, I think, right now, making sure that we don't have to let anyone go. So before you decide to skip out on your rent just because you can get away with it for now, think about all the other families and lives that are affected. If we have to get rid of some of our staff on property, they have families that they have to feed that they no longer can and they no longer can work. So you doing the right thing to pay for the roof over your head is also something that needs to be prioritized, just like buying food is right now. I get it. So back to the people reading this article who are not the tenant, but they are the landlord, and they might be freaking out a little bit about people either threatening striking or people paying late because it's just not the norm. I want to kind of go over some really great ideas and solutions when you're asking yourself, okay, well, so someone said they won't be able to pay the bills after you've already talked to them about why they can't, and it was because they were affected by COVID. Then you have to move forward, and it's always better to keep good tenants in your building, even if they can't pay, and work with them. That's always our policy. We want people who want to live there to live there. So going back to asking yourself, okay, we've got someone who cannot afford the full payment or to pay on time or whatnot, but we want to work with them because they're a good tenant. What do we do? What are our options? There's many different options, but the first option I would definitely focus on is increasing your communication to all of your residents. So this will usually happen before anyone reaches out to you. You actually have to be proactive and reach out to all of your residents and let them know that we have a plan for you if you do have a job loss due to COVID or due to coronavirus. So what we did was we ended up giving them resources on here's how to apply for unemployment. Here are all the different resources in our community. So we had St. Vincent de Paul. We had a couple of different options in our local community that were doing food pantries and helping to pay utility bills. And you can also reach back out to your providers of your utility bills, your phone bills, things like that. They are giving credits, and they are also not charging late fees, just like we're not. So, you give your residents resources. And then if they're utilizing all of these resources, they filed for unemployment, they maybe for some reason can't get unemployment, they filed for SNAP in Texas, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, to help with buying food, and maybe they can't get approved or something like that. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to, but again, you just have to have a plan. So this is part of the plan, is to let everybody know, hey, here's some resources, and if you have been affected, please come talk to us. We want to work with you. Being very clear that you want to work with, your good tenants or just your tenants in general, and the ones that want to stay, they'll come to you. So that's a great way to work with people. So is being clear about your plan to work with them, and then actually having your plan in place for, okay, if they can do one, then let's do that. If they can't do that, let's do this. If they can't, you have to have plan A through D, really. So we'll go over all those later. But in the beginning, you just have to reach out, be proactive, tell everybody to please communicate with you if they need anything, and then you kind of have to just wait for them to reach out and tell you what they need. When they do come to you and tell you what they need, here's the next step, is that you have to empathize with them. So you also know now what the steps are like. So in the beginning, you were saying to them, here's all your resources that you can use. And at this point, you've already thought out your plan of exactly what you're willing to give for either rent concessions or being creative with pulling monies out of their deposit account to be able to help pay for rent, or being able to, like we accepted late rent all month, no late fees. We waived all late fees. And so then if you had to pay on the 1st and the 15th, that was fine. The 15th and the 20th or whatever, it was okay as long as you paid, and then having promises to pay. But before you get to all those other options, you kind of have to think of yourself in the shoes of the person who's coming to you. That's why I think it's so cool that I rent, because I know exactly what they're feeling, and exactly what's going through my tenants or my residents' minds. So being empathetic, again, just letting them know you get it, you understand, you've lost a job before, for sure all of us have. We know what they're going through because all of us usually go through hardships when things change in the economy. It doesn't affect just a small group of people, it affects everybody. It doesn't matter, your income or your, height, weight, gender, color, anything like that. It doesn't discriminate. And, honestly, whenever you're empathizing with somebody, it may be a scary time for them. They may be afraid of losing their home or losing the ability to pay for their children's education or pay for their vehicle anymore. There's kind of a lot going through their mind. So you want to, of course, let them know that you understand and that, you want to work with them. So once you have empathized with your tenants, it's really important to then go back to, and rent is still due. So, you don't allow them to roll over you, as I did not roll over my landlord and friend, because that's just the lease that we signed. We signed the lease that rent is still due. Now, again, there can be workout plans. We can accept funds late. We can do a discount. We can do all kinds of different things, but the point is rent is still due, and that is not going away. Let them know that we are going to, for example, you may have people that want to threaten eviction, but we can't evict, so threatening anything doesn't help. And just working with your clients. So, rent is still due. Rent is still due at the same rate that we were at before. But just remember that it's your job to inform them of your business agreement together, and that you still have obligations on your end if you feel like you need to explain it to somebody who wants to argue with you. Like I explained earlier, we still have the obligation to pay the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and all the PITI on our properties, be able to keep them running and to keep people employed. Just because we can't evict doesn't mean that they don't owe us rent. They're not the same thing. Now, like I mentioned earlier, now is the time to give your residents options. So mentioning earlier that some of the things that we did was to help keep an eye on government programs, making sure that they know about the Paycheck Protection Program, that they know about SBA loans that are available, that they know about the new added stimulus or amount to unemployment. So there's more, and it also helps people who are self-employed too, like contractors. It's not just for those people who are working W-2. Just keeping everybody informed on assistance programs is really important. And then we obviously want to help where we can. So if they need to put it on a credit card, that is okay. We may offer to waive the fee on the credit card. We could set up rent collection systems so that the ability to pay can happen via credit card. So this may be a good time to make that more efficient. And then also something else, like I mentioned earlier, is that we can help our tenants by offering them to pay a little bit later if they need to, offer to pay in 2 payments, offer to not charge them any late fees. We can do many different things. Now, one of the last things that we thought about doing is just kind of modeling our business model after the government and after, our lending institutions. So whenever this happened, this is something that we thought was a good idea, but we have not had to use it yet. In the future, we may. So having a almost deferral or forbearance type program set up. So tenants still owe rent, but if they can't pay the full amount, what we can do, like I mentioned earlier, is we can take some out of their deposit account and we can use that. And then if they don't have that and they still are just unable to get anything figured out, we can actually do a deferral plan where what we do is we would charge them interest or a very, very small amount to stay in the unit. And then after a certain amount of days, the entire amount of what was owed is due. So that may be 90 days, that may be 20 days, that may be whatever it is to, work it out with them. It's kind of just a workout. So we can charge them a fee or like a percentage, almost like a financing fee, or interest, if you will, in the meantime, because we are financing a portion of our property to this person to use it. And whenever that period is over, the amount is due in full, or you can agree to spread those payments out over like a 4-month period or 6-month period, just adding it to their reoccurring or resuming amount of rent that they owe. Another option that we have offered to our renewal clients who might be in a not great situation is to put them on a 14-month long lease and then to be able to keep their current rent just exactly where it is and not increase rent for 2 months. And then once we get to what would be a 12-month lease, then their market rate, or then the rate on the apartment goes up to market rate. So that's been some of the things that we have done. There's a whole bunch of other options out there that you can do to be really creative. I listed off several of them, but basically the premise here is that your steps are you're wanting to have a plan. You need to empathize with your tenant. Again, put down your foot and your boundary lines that they still do owe rent. Then give your tenants options, and then worst case comes to worst, we can figure out how to do a deferral plan or take money out of their deposit accounts, or figure out a way to essentially finance the unit to them for the time being with a promise to pay, kind of how we usually do, but just an extended promise to pay. So I hope that some of these ideas helps you if you are a landlord, and I hope that some of the concepts in the beginning that I covered about how from the renter or resident side of things hopefully makes sense to you and explains or helps you to understand, if you are renting, exactly how it works and how business owners are not out to steal or screw you, but they have bills to pay to keep the property on and working and not repossessed by the bank. So if you want to enjoy where you live, it's important for everybody to work together and to try to see through each other's eyes, just as you normally should.